This Ashtyn Hawkins case is revolutionary for college football players.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas. And of course, joining us on this Wednesday, there's a reason why they call it Wicker Wednesday. Sydney Wicker of KCEN Channel 6 joins alongside today. We will talk about the Ashtyn Hawkins thing. Why haven't we heard more about this yet? And how it is starting to have a greater effect on the college football sport in general. And speaking of that sport, it ain't what it used to be, not like back in my day. We'll tell you why or why not college football is better in 2025 than it was even 10 or 15 years ago. Plus, another commitment for Scott Drew, first of the 2026 class, and he's got some NBA bloodlines. Boy, we're starting to get used to that at Baylor. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. We start here, Sydney, who's in the car again, once again on assignment. The work never stops for Sydney Wicker. We talked a week or two ago about the Ashtyn Hawkins thing. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. Yeah. When this first got handed down, he all of a sudden has no eligibility, and we knew right away that sounded like Baylor was going to fight this thing, just like we had seen up at Rutgers a few weeks before that. And yet here we are 2 weeks later. We've not heard anything new on it. Now, it's a very slow time for college football, but we have not heard anything new. First, before we get into what others are saying about this, do you think it's bizarre that we haven't heard anything new in the last 2 weeks here?
I don't think it's too bizarre because it's going to take a minute. Like, we know what we know, which is that the NCAA does not want Ashtyn Hawkins to play next year. And we know that Baylor doesn't like that. Now we got to get through all the logistics and the legal stuff. So I think 2 weeks really isn't a lot of time in retrospect to really think about it. I think it's going to be a little bit of a process. I think if we're looking at this a month from now and we haven't heard anything, that's kind of where we maybe raise an eyebrow, but I do think this is going to be a longer process.
And it's certainly something that frustrated a lot of Baylor's fan base. And I think a lot of college football fans following along thought this was Bush League, that they could just do that. And there are several cases of this. You know, we've heard some of the high-profile ones, Jett, Elad from Rutgers, and now Ashtyn Hawkins. Obviously, Diego Pavia did not have to fight this, but his initial fight was getting this waiver to actually become a thing. And I noticed on my Twitter timeline, somebody tweeted my tweet about reporting the news about Ashtyn Hawkins becoming ineligible. It's Nathan Kibambe, who plays at Elon, and he put out this long quote tweet about basically the NCAA screwing over these athletes, of which Nathan is one. These guys who had gotten JUCO waivers that was not clear at all, and now they don't have eligibility. So, Sydney, stick with me here. I'm going to read some of this. It's a very long post. It's worth your time to read, but I will only read some of this on the pod. But he says, countless athletes are stuck in limbo because of a JUCO waiver rollout that lacked clarity, consistency, and fairness. The NCAA put out a waiver with vague guidelines and completely mishandled the situation. He uses his personal anecdotes here. He called the NCAA and was told, we don't need anything. We don't know anything about that. Talk to your compliance office. So he went to the compliance office, and they said he'd be fine. They said that he would get another year of eligibility because he played 1 or 2 years at JUCO. And would have initially used up the eligibility in 2024, but qualified for the blanket waiver. So, this is back in Nathan's words, so like many others, I trusted the process, only to be told months later that I was ineligible. That's not just confusing. That's being misled in the very system we trusted. Because of the unclear NCAA waiver guidelines, I even lost scholarship opportunities that could have changed my life. Because of that, a lot of us entered the portal thinking we were eligible. Some took official visits, committed to school, signed NIL deals, and even went through spring football, only to be told months later, after the draft combine, after the draft, after the pro days, that we were ineligible. I even missed my pro day because the NCAA didn't give clear answers to schools. One last other little thing here. Yes, Diego Pavia and Jett Elad won their cases, but they had money to fight. Most of us can't afford $20,000+ just to stay on the field. That's not a fair process. It's economic discrimination. What doesn't make sense is this. The NCAA created that blanket waiver for Diego Pavia, but nothing for Jett Elad, even though there are clearly hundreds of athletes in the exact same situation as him. And he references NCAA bylaw 12816. I don't know how that goes. So says the 5-year rule exceptions must be applied consistently to similarly situated student athletes, which Diego Pavia, Jett Elad, very similar to Ashtyn Hawkins, and sounds like similar to Nathan Kibambe as well. Right now, only players with lawyers are getting cleared. That's selective enforcement. That's breaking your own code. Sydney, I just threw a lot at you, and you, the listeners, I just threw a lot out there at you. But what was your biggest takeaway from seeing that? Because there's a lot of things to break down in here, and none of them make the NCAA look good.
Yeah, I think just comparing a little bit, like the Baylor fans and stuff, when we all found out about the Ashton situation, we were all like sad, and my heart breaks for this kid, and it breaks for anybody else who's in this situation, because this is a guy who wants to play football. He wants to continue his career, and just for a little small minor misunderstanding or something here or there, or not getting approval, he's not able to play, or they're not allowing it. And it sucks. I think the money thing is what stood out to me the most, because that's not something I realized. I didn't realize that's $20,000 out of your own pocket that you're going to have to put up just for you to play the game you love. That doesn't guarantee that you'll be healthy all season. That doesn't guarantee you'll get an NIL deal. That doesn't guarantee that you'd even start. That just guarantees that you maybe get to fight and have that chance to play. And so I think it was a really real perspective that a lot of people needed to hear. I think it gives us a lot of clarity into what Ashtyn might be going through right now. And, you asked, do you think this, we should be hearing answers now? Listening to what this kid did and all the processes and the steps that he went through, oh my gosh, I'm like, we don't know where Ashtyn's at in all of this yet. Yeah. So I think it really put a lot of things into perspective.
It almost feels like you're doing your taxes with a certified tax professional, and they tell you, okay, this is what you have to pay. And then you pay it. And then a month later, it's like, actually, you have to pay this amount or you're going to jail. Yeah. It's like, well, okay, what? This was not the way it was presented to me. I was told I had eligibility here. I was told this was the money that I had to pay. And now they go back on that. And it's like, NCAA is just kind of like, sorry. SOL, I guess. And yeah, for a player like Nathan Kibambe, who's playing at Elon, 20,000 is a lot of money for him, or for the football team and whatever's in their budget there. That's a lot of money compared to Baylor or Vanderbilt, which are, on the smaller side of Power 4, but are Power 4. That's a huge difference. And again, we see a lot of people complaining, and I'm amongst this, by the way, not all the time, but sometimes for sure, of those players who play like 7 years of college football. You're like, okay, get a job, right? But and they're just holding on to this for some more money, from NIL and whatever. Like, this ain't the case. And there's a lot of Nathan Kibambes out there. Like, this guy is trying to play some more football, and he's trying to get another degree, right? Like, he is trying to do this so that he can finish college. And the NCAA is turning this around at the 11th hour. It just sucks, man. It just sucks any way you look. And I'm really happy that Nathan Kibambe is coming out and saying this, because there are a lot more players like him than there are of, Ashtyn Hawkins and Jett Elad, guys who this also happened to, but play at big enough schools that it hopefully will not end up being an issue. There was a lot in there, but a lot that made a ton of sense, especially with what we've known from the NCAA over the years. And Sydney, last thing, it's a rotten situation, man. And I hope all these players can get out of it. Of course, we follow the Ashtyn Hawkins thing pretty closely, but there's a lot of players out there that do not have kind of a locked on podcast to talk about their struggles in this situation. Yeah. It just stinks, man.
It does. And like you said, I think it's just so important to really hear it. I think the way he described it and explained everything, he did it in such a realistic way. Like, I really read that feeling emotional. I was like, this poor kid, you can tell he just wants to play. And there's so many guys, and there's so many great JUCO athletes out there. I have covered some of the best. I was at East Mississippi, which, you know, that's home of Buddy Stevens and one of the powerhouses of JUCO football. And I've covered so many good guys. And like out of the JUCO program, only so many of them get to go on from there to actually play at a college. And then to go from there, a lot of them don't get to go pro. Like if you look at the numbers, like it only happens to so many. And so to just see a guy who really just wants to finish his degree, who wants to play a little bit more, that's what college football is about. That is what you want. You want those guys who want to be there and who want to play. And that's simply all that a lot of them are trying to do. So it made me feel for them. It sucks. I think it's worth every read. I think it gives you a lot of insight to this situation and exactly who the NCAA is at the end of the day.
Yeah, because we only scratched the surface of that, and it's great that it's also getting a ton of traction on social media. Hopefully, that's a start. College football is really weird. The last couple of years, it's almost unrecognizable in a lot of ways from what we watched growing up. But does that make college football worse? Let's talk about that next, coming up on Locked On Baylor. But first, let me ask you a question. You ever look at that bank account and say, oh, where did all my money go? I know I certainly do that way more often than I should. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, all things I do more often than I should, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. It isn't just a budgeting app, okay? You'd be silly if you think that's what it is. It's a complete financial command center, darn it. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check those finances, track the spending, plan your long-term goals. Again, all in one place. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDON, COLLEGE, for half off your first year. Running back on Locked On Baylor, Sydney Wicker of KCEN Channel 6 joins. I'm Cam Stuart. You know, we talk about it a lot, almost ad nauseum, right? College football, golly, so much different. Even than 5 or 6 years ago. Conference realignment, NIL, transfer portal, the exorbitant amounts of money being thrown around, college football playoff. It's all very, very different from the game that you and I even grew up watching, which, you know, for a lot of our listeners is not all that long ago, right? And it's a very different game. Josh Pate, of one of the leading voices, really, of college football entertainment and in college football talk in this country, was almost offended by saying that on his show recently, which is a huge show for college football, and saying, you know, is it really like when Michigan and Ohio State are playing in a tie game late in the third quarter and the crowd's going nuts? Are you really thinking about what the left tackle's making or how many years this guy's played or where he played the year before? That's an extreme scenario, which we'll get to in a second. But his question at the end of it, which has been a lightning rod for college football analysts, podcasters all over social media, was this: does Saturday still feel like Saturday? Sydney, we have seen a lot of change in college football. I've bitched about it, Lord knows. Does Saturday still feel like Saturday? Is our game still the same?
Honestly, I feel like Saturdays are still as electric as they were when I was a kid. I wake up every morning and I watch College game day from start to finish. And if I'm not watching it at my house while I'm getting ready to go cover a game, I'm watching it or listening to it in the car as I'm driving to one. Like, that has been a tradition in my house since I was a kid, probably running around in diapers. You watch game day or you're out tailgating at a game every Saturday. And I still do that. And I think he does have a point. There's never a time when I'm covering an athlete or I'm watching a game where I'm like, I wonder how much money that guy's making. I don't even do that when I watch the NFL. Like, I really don't care how much money they're
not our
making.
money,
I'm
too.
watching it, because I love the game so much. And so to me, Saturdays do still feel like Saturdays. I think the point when college football doesn't feel like college football is when we more so get to bowl season and the playoffs. That's when it kind of shifts a little bit for me. But a normal Saturday, I feel like still has its glory.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's kind of the way I think about it. Like, you put me in a November Saturday at a Baylor game, yep, it's still going to feel the same. We love it. It's why we continue to show out. It's literally all the rest of those days that aren't the 12 to 14 Saturdays in the college football season that feel very different. It's these months that we're doing these shows, and it's portal and NIL and yeah, there's still some anxiety, by the way, which you didn't have 5 or 10 years ago when you are having a guy having a great season. Like, Lord knows there was a ton of the Baylor fan base this year that is seeing this great renaissance in a way. Sawyer Robertson, Bryson Washington, Josh Cameron, what a story. But every time they throw a touchdown or make a long run or catch a touchdown, you've got to think, boy, I really hope nobody throws a ton of money at this kid and we can't have him on our team next year. Because, like, that's what college football is supposed to be. And that's how it kind of differentiated itself from the pros, really in our lifetimes, and even more, was that you could grow with these guys. They would be here for 4 years. You knew what your roster was going to look like in some respects the next year. I think basketball falls into this very much so as well. And now that's just not the case. You're rolling out, some chance at some points, half a new team or a full new team every year. And it becomes, what conference are they in and what's the quality loss and how good was their loss and I'm not going to lie. Like, we grew up in the BCS era. That was crazy in its own right, for sure. But it is different. Is it bad? Not enough to keep us from going and watching and covering. I mean, we talk about it like 24/7, Sydney. It's our jobs, right? Yeah. But you're not going to think about it in the Michigan-Ohio State game when it's 17-all at the end of the third quarter. Of course you're not. You'd be insane if you were.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it is completely ruined. I don't want it to sound like Saturday Night Live, every year it's dead. But it is different. It's different. And I think for a lot of people, it makes college football a little less lovable. We're in it, right? We love it. There's nothing that's going to pry us away at this point, really. But I think there are a lot of people that do feel like it's different enough that it's taken a lot of the fun out of it. And I want to go to this tweet from Carter Yates, who has been on the show before. He's a Dave Campbell's Texas football guy, and they cover a lot of, all the Texas teams at Dave Campbell's. And he says, fall Saturdays still feel the same if you're a fan of or only cover the top 25 teams in college football. And that's what Josh Pate does. He has to focus on 6 or 8 teams every year. For those of us who are covering other teams that are on the outside or fans of other teams on the outside or season ticket holders, I think that's a very different perspective from one that someone like Josh Pate is throwing out there.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. It's funny because, like, I just think when I came into Baylor and we've talked so many times about I came in, they were the 2-4 squad at that time.
It was negative.
Like,
yeah,
it was negative. And I'll never forget my first Baylor game. I looked up and it wasn't a truly packed stadium, but the people that were there, it was a good enough crowd and the energy was good. I was like, this is fun. Like, no part of me was like, this isn't fun. This isn't, like, it hadn't lost its love. I was like, I am in Texas at a football game on a Saturday. And I think for the people who were there, you loved that. And then when I covered my first TCU Baylor game, like, it was electric. And then having the fans rush the field at the end of it, although probably not my favorite memory ever, it was still cool to be a part of. Yes, the madness of the sea was a little bit much for a first timer, but it was still, I still thought it had its fun. And at that point, nobody was like, there's no college football playoff for Baylor. Like, and there was no talks of that, but I still thought that there was so much love for the game, for where it was and who was there. And I think there's so many people who can look at it that way. And I've heard Southerners, like real, like people in Mississippi and Alabama who talk so much about like it's not the same, or I don't even watch college football anymore, but I feel like that's so rare. I think there's still so many people that
Mhm.
love it, and it sucks how much the game has changed in a lot of ways, but it's part of it, and we have to deal with it. So if you
Yeah.
want to love it and you want to watch it, you got to put up with it.
And it really is about being in that, maybe not necessarily even physically being there, but
Yeah.
appreciating that and having that peace of mind, because it's a good point in that we talked about it after like right after the TCU game. I was talking about that, how great that was, that we got a day like that the fans really cared, and neither of these teams going to the college football playoff. Like probably still at that point, probably still neither of them going to the Big 12 championship game, although Baylor had a weird scenario in the last week that they could have gone there. But it's just it has to be that. And maybe a lot of this is social media too, by the way, which unfortunately I have to contribute to in some way. That, when you win a game like that, all you see on Twitter afterwards is, oh, they're storming the field against a 4-4 team. And, oh, wait till they play this team or this team. It's just like, come on, just enjoy it. So yeah, it is, it is different, but I will say, I mean, our college football that we grew up with was also very much different from the ones our parents grew up with,
Yeah.
and so on down the line. Is it as crazy as it's ever been? Yeah, probably. And there's a lot that I don't like about it, but as long as you focus on what's happening on the field week to week, you're going to be a lot happier.
Agreed. Yeah. And you have your favorite players. You have the
Mhm.
jerseys of those players you can buy now and rep, and you
Yeah.
find out their stories, and you love them even more for who they are and the people that rep your school. So I think there's so much to it. And if you haven't been to a football game in the last 5 years and you want to talk all this stuff, go to a game before you say anything and tell me that the magic's still not there.
We love it. You know what else we love? The NBA bloodlines coming to Baylor basketball. Monty Williams' son, who is his own player, man, is coming to the Baylor Bears. What that means for the program, for Scott Drew, and the future of Baylor basketball coming up next on Locked On Baylor. Locked On Baylor, Wicker Wednesday. Sydney Wicker of KCEN Channel 6. I'm Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas. So, Bears get their first real commit of the 2026 college basketball class, high school basketball class into college basketball. That's Elijah Williams coming out of San Antonio, the son of former NBA Coach of the Year, Monty Williams, who's coaching him at TMI Episcopal down there in the San Antonio area. This is a top 40 recruit, 4-star guy coming in. Sydney, it feels pretty cool now to start talking about, the son of an NBA Finals MVP, Andre Iguodala, coming in. Now the son of an NBA Coach of the Year coming in. And, oh, yeah, by the way, both are pretty good players in their own right.
Yeah, I remember when he went on his visit, you sent me the tweet, I think, and you're like, "Let's go." So
Here we go.
excited about it. And now that it's kind of the real deal, it feels pretty special. So I'm excited. I haven't seen, or I want to watch some of him like as a high school player. And, I don't really know much about him in general. But huge news for Baylor.
Mhm.
Exciting for Scott Drew. This is awesome. And already starting to build some key pieces to that 26 roster, like you said, that's huge.
Yeah, and to keep everyone updated on it, by the way, he's having a big time spring. If you're into watching some AAU basketball and could find a way to stream that, he's averaging about 20 points a game. He's shooting over 40% from three, which I know a lot of Baylor fans like to hear. It's not someone that you would really have to work on his jump shot, it sounds like, when he does come to campus, which is the case for some guys integrating their way into college basketball. He also said this to ESPN, to Paul Biancardi, quote, "The attention the whole staff gave me, especially head coach Scott Drew, was the difference in why he picked Baylor. The calls and texts were very consistent. The belief in me, the belief they had in me made a difference. Like the school and the campus a lot. Coach Drew is smart, caring, funny, and a great basketball coach." Man, he waxed poetic. "He cares about me as a person, a young man, as well as a basketball player." This takes me to a greater point, because Sydney, when I was growing up, Duke had always had like the sons of coaches and NBA players, right? It was Mike Dunleavy and Chris Collins, and now you've got David Robinson's son went there, And it's all across the board. They trusted Mike Krzyzewski. Do you feel like that's a good sign for Baylor? I mean, like, we obviously know Scott Drew is a great coach and a Hall of Famer and a great guy. Like, we don't need to be convinced of that. But when you see people like really in the basketball world, in the NBA world, that see it played at the highest level, we hear how much they brag about it at BYU, right? We're going to make this an NBA program. But the NBA people are trusting Scott Drew. They like Scott Drew's program. Is that just like an extra notch on his belt?
Of course it is. Like, I mean, you heard all of the things he's listed. We hear guys say that every single week about Scott Drew. They always want to be at Baylor because they can grow as humans and as athletes. And that's why they come. Like, I think it's tough because so many times we forget how much these guys are people and not just the guys we see on the court. And there's so much that goes into their decisions. And sometimes we will never understand, but sometimes it comes down to the littlest things, is feeling seen and feeling validated and where they're at and where they're able to grow. And so I think this is huge. It's huge for Scott Drew. It's huge for Baylor. And you talk about the legacies of other programs like the Dukes and the UNCs of the world. Baylor's up there. They have a legacy and people want to play there. And this is one of those guys. And this is just a statement to that.
Elijah Williams, 4-star, top 40 recruit, picks Baylor over conference rival Arizona, as well as some others like Notre Dame, Oregon, Washington. Monty Williams' son, Monty Williams, trusts Scott Drew, and so does his son. So that is the first commit for the 2026 class. 6'6", 202 pounds. Man, he's going to be a fun one to watch in Waco. It's pretty much going to wrap it up for Locked On Baylor today. So get involved in the comment section below. Let us know what you think about Ashtyn Hawkins and this whole thing and what we're missing here and how the NCAA or why the NCAA needs to rectify this. Is college football still the same? Please let us know in the comment section below. Sydney, appreciate you coming on one more time. It's not one more time. She'll be on again. For coming on for Wicker Wednesday and for all the work you're doing covering those college or high school baseball, high school softball going on in Central Texas. And before you know it, Sydney, we'll have you back out on the field at Baylor for some football games.
I know. It's going to be here quicker than we know it. I am so excited. I have 2 more weeks to grind through. We've got state championships for softball this week and state championships for baseball next week. And then it's going to be the dead season pretty much through like most of July. And I cannot wait for that.
You got to rest up. You got to charge the batteries.
You know it. I know. It's time to recharge a little bit, but I'm excited.
And then August 1st, you'll be out there, 100
out
degrees.
There.
High schools, colleges. Oh, can't wait. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, find us on YouTube and wherever you find your podcasts. And we will see you tomorrow. Thanks again for making it your first listen today and every day on Locked On Baylor.